Economics with EPW. In today's edition, I'll be discussing in brief about our Money Banking Finance Special Issue for 2020, which we had published on 28th of March. This issue has been guest edited by Professor Partha Ray from the Indian Institute of Management, Kolkata, and it comprises of 5 special articles written by eminent academicians across a wide range of national and international institutions, plus a very interesting overview of the issue or the introduction written by Ray himself. Thematically, this issue is about questioning certain orthodoxies in the money banking and financial sector, especially since the 2008 financial crisis. Say for example, if we take Rakesh Mohan's article, it probes into 3 fundamental questions. One, why the advanced economies, despite of this aura about their ability of macroeconomic management, could barely predict the North Atlantic financial crisis of 2007-8. Number 2, in the post-crisis period, even with changing roles of the central bank and their monetary and fiscal policies, why are these economies still finding it difficult to strike a balance between financial stability and economic growth? And number 3, compared to them, why have the emerging economies performed better in terms of balancing growth with stability? Is it because these emerging economies could chart their own path on the basis of their economic circumstances or realities, rather than following some textbook prescriptions of macroeconomic management? Another article by Utso Paul Mustafi and Rajeshwari Sengupta also questions another orthodoxy of the financial sector, or rather I would say it questions a general accusation of top heaviness that arises against all central banks. Now, to see how much of RBI's monetary policies are reflections of the mood of the period vis-a-vis the personality of the governors, this paper analyzes the regime of 4 RBI governors, starting with Bimal Jalan in 1997 till Raghuram Rajan, and the results indicate that this top heaviness cannot be a blanket accusation for at least 3 of the 4 governors, namely Jalan from 1997 to 2003, Y.V. Reddy from 2003 to 2008, and Raghuram Rajan from 2013 to 2016. If there are any similarities in their governorships, these similarities are due to some overlapping or similar political regimes, or similarities in the underlying macro-financial variables, or both. Now, in this context, I would like to call your attention to the fact that prior to adopting the inflation targeting approach of policy rate determination in 2016, RBI had largely followed a multi-indicator approach of policy rate determination. This could have made the successive governors respond to macroeconomic conditions in a discrete manner, frequently trying to rebalance the priorities between growth and price stability, which in turn might have come across as top heaviness in the general perception. Now, another question that is raised in this issue is on the efficacy of financial regulations in resolving the credit growth crisis, particularly in the Indian banking sector. We have 2 articles around this theme. The first one by Zico Dasgupta traces the current downswing to a policy regime since 2010s that have allowed loan default, corporate debt write-offs by the public sector banks, and Ponzi financing. This has finally culminated into the current period's repayment crisis of the non-financial corporate sector, which has adversely affected both the interest income and profitability of the banks as well as the NBFCs. Now, in this context, a more pertinent question that arises is, what can those four C's of the government, namely the court, the Central Vigilance Commission, the CBI and the CAG, do in order to foster the credit cycle? Now here, if we look at Abhijit Bansal, Abhiman Das and Saibal Ghosh's paper, it brings some very interesting findings to the table. On one hand, it says that yes, the presence of financial misconduct impacts the lending behavior of the state-owned banks, in the sense that if there is a 10% increase in financial misconduct, it would lower the lending of state-run banks by 0.2%. On the other hand, it also points out to the fact that if there is a 10% increase in the fear of prosecution, it would also have a similar impact on the lendings of the state-owned banks, that is, the lending would decline by 0.2%. So ultra-conservatism can actually yield similar results as no conservatism, especially when there is no clear strategic vision about the future of public sector banks in India. Lastly, this issue also evaluates the much claimed benefits of global stock market integration, especially from the perspective of the Indian investors, with a pinch of caution. Now, the interconnectedness of the global stock markets has also increased the risk of financial sector destabilization. While the policymakers need to react to this destabilizing effect of financial integration, domestic investors too need to be cautious while diversifying their investment portfolio in the global stock markets. The paper by Abhishek Bhandari and Bandi Kamaiya provides some valuable insights on stock market diversification, primarily for the individual investors, but I think the policies can also take some lessons from this paper. The authors have looked at the behavior of 25 major stock indices from both developed and emerging markets from 1997 through 2014, and the results point towards the Indian investors' need for caution when diversifying into the Brazilian and the East Asian stock markets. Apart from this, this issue has also some interesting application of econometric models. Say for example, in Pal Mustafi and Sengupta's paper, there is this use of Markov switching vector autoregression model to estimate regime changes in India's monetary policy. Or in Kamaiya and Bhandari's paper, they have used multiple and wavelet based pairwise correlation analysis to see the pairwise interconnectedness between stock price indices over different time horizons. There are also some interesting usage of very innovative data sets, say for example the bank level financial misconduct data from Lok Sabha questionnaires, along with the fear of prosecution data from the Central Vigilance Commission that have been used by Bansal, Das and Ghosh in their article. Well, I think by now many of our readers must have looked up this issue. For those of you who have not done yet, kindly do it immediately, and also please stay tuned for more updates from us, and more importantly, don't forget to subscribe to the video.